So welcome everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Becky Carr and I do a fair few of these webinars. So if you're ever interested in looking at prior webinars, HR Profiling site has some different topics from all over the place that you can enjoy. So, today's webinar, we're going to be looking at what I feel is the wonderful sales competency reports. Now, we have both the recruitment and the development, so I've thrown it all into one today just to have a quick peek around it. These really are such great sales tools to use for when hiring and developing salespeople. As manager, coach, trainer, or recruiters, the insights gained from these particular reports are so invaluable in reporting confident and effective hiring decisions, understanding true analytics of the sales position, and really knowing what you need in sales, in an actual salesperson to achieve success in that position. In development, say, the reports help in pointing where coaching and training will make the most significant impact on your salespeople and your sales team. So from my point of view, no more generalized sales programs. Instead, you can deliver programs that have real impact for individuals and teams. Well, I have to say, I actually think in the few short years that these reports have been out, they certainly are making an impact out there with the data that can be gleaned from them. I find that my clients, both small and large, are really getting incredible value from them with unique data specifically analysed for their specific situation, which is what I love. So the purpose of today is just to give you an overview of what's in these valuable reports without going into too much detail. There's a few tips and tricks in here as well, and we'll try and keep to the time limit. Right. First of all, a couple of things to mention. The competency reports are not DISC-based at all. Now, for those of you that have already done the training, you'll know this, but those of you that are new to the competency reports, they are a completely different product from DISC. But of course, you will have access to them once you're trained. So, of course, these sales competencies can be merged with DISC behaviours, using specialised reports later on, and they can give you even more data on top, of course. You might already know of these reports, like the Thinks 18, the Sales 18 is behavioural based and it can overlap. Actually, just on that note, for many of you, you'll already know that there's another new report out called the Sales IQ. I mean, I'm loving that combination report as it's so easy to read. It's more like a traffic light system, so it highlights development and strengths and areas of need of strength and potential strength, etc. So, we'll leave that for today, but it's definitely something I can look at another time. So, it's not related to DISC. Then you'll also then see my second bullet point. That means that the questions you answer is very different from the 24 questions asked in DISC. So these are actually 99 forced questions. It usually takes a participant around about 25, 30 minutes to complete it. And these are totally sales aligned questions, which actually brings me to point 3. It's pretty important to note that these sales competence assessments are designed for individuals who have at least some sales experience. Like I'm talking, say, 6 months, maybe more. I mean, I tend to say 6 months to a year. The reason being is that these individuals, if they haven't been in sales or have a sales background, cannot accurately interpret the statements that are shown in the questionnaire. So these assessments are specifically for sales sector with some sales experience, okay? Lastly, you'll see on the slide there is a little bit of prep to be done, okay? And if you really want to dig down and analyse the data in accordance to your specific situation or your client's situation, then you really require to evaluate, say, like, for example, the sales position itself for the recruitment assessment. Or if you're using, say, the development assessment, you do need to do a little bit of prep on the type of selling actually needed in that actual person's position at the time, so that the existing staff member. If you know all the requirements of what is needed, what is needed to be selling, then I mean, look, to be honest, it just goes back a step. We all know that every selling is very, very different based on industry, product, service. So, you know, analysing and really understanding the current sales position or the type of selling needed clarifies a heck of a lot more data faster. Okay, so I learned that pretty quickly on, early on, because I was out there using it with clients and I realized that actually I needed to know a lot more information before I started using it. So just word of warning, a little bit of input needed. Right, before I'm going to look at the reports, I just want to clarify exactly what I'm talking about with the word competency. Easiest for me to do is a dictionary definition. And basically, it's the ability to do something successfully or efficiently. Quite like that. It's nice and direct and to the point. But it's also good to understand that competencies don't actually have to be only natural to the person. They can definitely be learned and developed as well, you know, through experience, their attitude, and of course, things like sales training or coaching that they receive or do receive over the years. Obviously, training helps us more cognizant of techniques and how to do certain aspects of sales. I mean, gosh, I guess that's why we do it, really. So there's really 18 competencies that measure all sorts of critical aspects of selling, and anyone can develop them as needed to enable a person to do a specific job or task that the situations need. I guess the thing to remember here is, you know, sometimes it's a little harder for some salespeople to raise certain aspect or competencies of that doing that sale over a particular level. And maybe they have other parts of their competency or other aspects of sales that they can raise to a high level, no trouble at all. It sounds weird, I know, but you know, these reports help to clarify this sort of data. And it's pretty helpful for understanding developing pathways, for example. We won't be going into that today to show you actually how you evaluate that. All that's done in the training. But you can just imagine if you're doing a sales training program and someone has already peaked at a particular competency, how much do you really want effort and energy do you keep pushing into that particular competency when there could be some other ones? So basically, competency reports are pretty popular because they really dig down on things like attitudes, the mindsets, the behaviors, and the abilities, and it's all spelt out pretty clearly for the evaluator, which hopefully is going to be you. So let me just bring these up on the slide here. As I've said, the Sales Competency Assessment is designed to identify the candidate's present level of proficiency in these 18 critical sales competencies. It's pretty important for me, I guess, at this stage to reiterate that it's the present level. And you can see those 18 competencies on the slide here. So when I say present level, it's because, you know, we can change that. Things can get tweaked and changed and looked at and look at what the blocks are. So it incorporates a wide variety of sales aspects. You can see on the screen here, the competencies that are measured are things like prospecting, rapport building, jumping down to needing approval, listening, critical thinking. I mean, even into areas like money concept. So each of these competencies have their own very specific meaning. And I have to say, it's really important to refer to that meaning and not your own. That's how I find a lot of accredited trainers on this can go wrong, and also clients. They start to use their own bias of what these things mean. I guess what on the slide here, what I've actually brought up is what we call a summary page. So you can actually see the person's overall results as they are displayed in percentages for that candidate or for that person. Okay, so it makes it pretty easy. But just a note, can I say, this is not a zero-sum game, which means you cannot be all high in every competence. Where someone might be really strong in a few of the competencies, other competencies might be affected as they develop them further because they're no longer concentrating or focusing on those particular ones. So it's just not possible to be able to focus on all 18. You can give it a darn good go though, but it would be pretty draining. So just to let you know, there are times that you actually don't really need the respondent to score high in some competencies. You know, if they don't really need them, or that competency is not a priority to their type of selling or the role that they are looking to be hired for, you know, it's actually good to be low. However, if the same competency is then evaluated to be one of the priorities for that particular sales position, and then they score low, then that's a different story. And the analytics begins as to sort of why, and are they coachable in this area? How coachable in this area? At what, how they maxed out? You know, are they underperforming? All different things that you can go into. You can even see on the bottom here where the report lets us know for the over 3 pages, for example, how that person's percentage works and what the description is of this. So with this particular one I have down here is prospecting. This person got a mid-range mark, and so both sides are highlighted. In the reports, you'll find that one side is usually highlighted because they have a lower or higher mark as well. Okay, so just to make it a little bit more complex, no kidding, just to show you what it can actually go down into. You know, this report analyzes far more than just the 18 competencies. Each one of these competencies are actually made up of 1 to 3 mindsets. A lot of people say to me at this stage, you know, Becky, what on earth, what do you count as, what is mindsets? But basically, in a nutshell, sales mindsets are the way an individual identifies with their product or service and how they approach things like solving sales problems, overcoming challenges. So if I had to say, it would be more basically their instinct in doing sales. But they are so important because, you know what, they are the things that can uncover self-defeating beliefs, attitudes. They uncover obstacles in their sales success. Here's the thing, as I said before, 1 to 3 of these mindsets make up each competency. So yes, you can guess that when you actually tie them together, which we'll have a look a little bit later on, the weighting of the mindsets in the background is quite complex. But lucky for you, it's all done for you and it's produced in the report. But there are some manual tricks and bits that you can do that you get taught in the accreditation that will help you analyse data even further. So just to bring it back to the reports themselves, both reports up until this point display both the competencies and the mindsets that I've shown you so far. So really incredible information. The results then can carry on and help pinpoint things like how to develop them, their current strengths, potentially if they might be at an overuse part of their competency in some way, or underusing, or it could be a potential weakness or a limited development, all sorts of things. We sort of have a matrix for working that out that we show you. You know, for me as a consultant, and also say the managers or HR people I work with, this stuff is gold. You can make decisions on sales development based on these results. And especially when you start looking at them in a team situation, you can start to analyze trends that are emerging and really tailor your training program specifically for what needs to be tweaked or the trends that you see. It's yielded so much incredible growth over the years that I've been using them. So the next one is for us to look at is really just looking at these reports themselves. You know, up to this point, they both have the same information in it, but now I think it's probably easier that I sort of break off into the separate reports so that you can see them a little bit easier as well. So first of all, let's just have a look at the recruitment report and go through some of the key aspects. I don't have time today to do all of them, but you know, we know that recruitment in itself can be so challenging and can be expensive. So selecting the right hire that fits with the role can seem, you know, a little bit daunting at times. The new salesperson you're wanting to hire really needs to have, you know, the right skills, the ability, attitudes, and of course, behaviors to fit with what you need in the position. But guessing to get it right can be pretty dangerous. This is where the sales competency recruitment report can eliminate a lot of that guesswork as it looks really at actual alignment of the sales functions instead. And I have to say, it's pretty thorough. So often a lot of the candidates' perceived competency is based on their previous experience and how well they sell that to you. So it's fair to say there is still quite a bit of guesswork involved in recruiting for that right fit, well beyond the interview process. So the Sales Competency Recruitment Report has pretty much, well, I'm going to show you 3 key areas briefly today, just to give you an idea. We have the Sales Competency Summary Report, which I've already shown you. And then we also have the mindsets. And from there, you can work out quite an amazing amount of data when you merge both mindsets and the competencies together and work from there to see development areas. It highlights, as I said before, strengths, potential issues, all sorts of things. What I wanted to show you, though, with the recruitment report is the second one down, something called the sales models. These look at 3 specific elements in selling, or dimensions, or we often call them disciplines. They are looking at things like the sales cycle, the sales relationship length, and how specific needs of the sale is identified. We'll have a look at this further over the page, but just showing you here, sales models. The third thing we're going to have a look at is by combining these various sales models above those sales models that we just mentioned above, we actually get something called job roles. Now, each job role is made up of specific skills, competencies, and mindsets that are usually needed to be successful in that type of selling. So we'll be looking at this as well. Okay, so I'm going to skip the number 1 bar and go straight into this one here because we've already really looked at the number 1. Okay, so here are the 3 disciplines that I was talking about. This is the needs, the cycle, and the relationship. So firstly, let me explain needs. If you're buying a pair of shoes, you're likely to be fairly specific on what size you need, what you might like or be looking for, or at least, you know, some kind of idea, ankle length, maybe color, maybe brand. So we call this an express need. Some sales reps tend to have competencies that are better in exploring express needs, like working in retail, for example. And as you can guess, there's times where a customer has no idea, or they really don't know what they need. And we often associate this with being called latent need. They don't really know yet what it is they need. They know nothing about the actual programs or services or products, or not much particularly. And sometimes you'll even get customers that really, truly don't even know that they need anything at all. I won't go into, this is not a sales training today, so I won't go into that, but it just gives you an idea. The second discipline is cycle length, and some types of selling require the sales cycle between the salesperson and the customer to be really long. You know, perhaps it's complex or involves demonstrations, multiple people, or maybe it's a really high ticket offer and has real significant consequences once it's actually bought. Other times we might have a type of product or service that has a short cycle, maybe because it's a simple product or service, or a product that is a necessity, like, for example, buying milk or bread, etc. We go to pick it up. There's not a heck of a lot of selling needed to pick up some milk or bread that you actually need. The third discipline is relationship. Of course, there's some products or services that once the initial sales is done, there is no need for further relationship or contact with that person. But on the other hand, there is many times something that is sold needs further contact, continued relationship to help implement the sale, or, you know, further relationship for more sales, even better. You know, perhaps the contact is part of the service like IT monitoring or maintenance, and they've bought into it, but it's a continued maintenance. But believe it or not, you know, a long relationship is not essential for all sales. I have to say, I actually noted that my clients really enjoy this part of the evaluation and really get a lot out of analysing the how and what the type of selling that is really involved with their candidates or their salespeople, you can start to see that, measuring the potential candidate as to their different capabilities, their mindsets and competencies towards, just these 3 different aspects will help you gain some insight into the current ability and focus, where they're putting their focus at the moment. And obviously that brings you closer to some very effective hiring methods and makes you a lot more confident, I can tell you. So this is where we start to bring in something called job roles. Now, it's the combination of these 3 disciplines that I've talked to you about before, latent need, express need, short cycle, long cycle, short relationship, long relationship, etc., etc. I'm amazed I could rattle that out. So by having a combination of them, of course, we train you a little bit more in this when you do the accreditation, but you can imagine how it can actually help you understand, getting deeper down and in depth, what you really actually should be recruiting for. So the clients, as I say, enjoy this part. And quite often I have to say it's not just one particular job role that emerges. There's usually 2 or 3 that are simply fine for doing that particular role, and it will be successful in that role. So I'm not at all saying that you have to just shorten it down to 1. I mean, you can if you want, but it's going to be pretty limited candidates. The other thing I find too by doing this assessment, assessing this particular way, is that I often see then that the ads that they run change up as well for specifically what they're needing. And that for me is great. It means that, they've seen how they could potentially get a tighter fit of candidate applying for the job as well. Right, well, taking it just a little bit further here, the reports, of course, then go into more depth about the sales roles and break them down into descriptions and the combinations of the models that make up the role. The report details about the type of, how that type of selling may sound, so that helps you also with the fit. And then, even better, the report displays the candidate's job roles, abilities in order, or to be specific, 3 different levels. This is so we can then see what that sales rep's current strengths of the job roles are, which is the top line, the potential development job roles, and lastly, we could, there can be potentially current weaknesses in job roles as well. I don't always like that word weaknesses, but they can sit down the bottom, and we call those marginal. You can see on the slide on the right, the 2 slides on the right, actually, I've shown 2 different people. One has more strengths on the top line of the job roles than the other. Funnily enough, though, in this recruitment role, it was analysed as this particular role needing a sales innovator and or a sales provider as the best match, which is interesting because none of them are on the top role, on the top line. Have a look where they sit on the page on my slide. As I said, neither are in the top part. Obviously, the sales competency accreditation, we teach you what the options are when you have this sort of situation or what to look for. But the more you use the reports, the more it becomes apparent in what you might be looking for. This was interesting. And you know what, this is pretty much well, not common, but it is a fairly common case where you might be analysing and recruiting for very specific job roles like you do, and they're not the strengths of the people. So what does one do? So I'll leave that for you to think over. Can you imagine if you've done your homework then in the sales positions, you really then start to know what job roles or service for your services or products you actually need. And all in all, I have to say the recruitment is far more effective and accurately assessed, especially in the selection process as well. So you're not wasting anyone's time and your own. Oh, so I already flipped that over, sorry. Lost my way. Okay, so let's have a look at the sales development report. I think it's pretty important to have a look at both. Now, I've said to you before that up until this point, we already have the competency summary and the mindset pages. We had a quick look at that before. I tend to use the competencies and mindset combinations a lot more deeply in this development report. So you can see on the right-hand side that this is what I mean by when we combine the competencies with the mindsets that make them up, okay? It looks complex, but believe it or not, it actually gets pretty easy to go through and assess. And of course, you get trained on that as well. So for example, typically someone may understand how important following a sales process is, or even being able to control a sales process, but do they actually do it when they are selling? Is it a focus? Deep down thoughts and issues in their own perceived attitude towards using it might be hindering their ability or even stopping them wanting to really use it for some reason. And they can be quite low in these areas. Or perhaps the company doesn't have a sales process, or if they do, perhaps it's not transparent enough to the sales reps. When I say perceived attitude, by the way, I'm talking things like their experience in using different aspects of sales, their want to use it, or, typically maybe they've never even been exposed to that type of selling or those particular aspects, So all these things can affect how they score in the development report. So just remember that these mindsets and competencies can be shifted. After all, that is what sales coaching and training programs do, and it's why we have them. However, it's your job to figure out the why and use the data correctly. Okay, part of my favorite pages coming up. But if once you've actually completed the assessment and analysing of the mindsets and the combinations of what that actually means to the person, basically finding the why, the report then goes into helping to identify a development plan. And I'm not talking a general plan, but a very specific plan for each competency, depending on what their percentage result was for that competency. Honestly, these pages are gold for me. They help me check in that I'm on the right track. They pick up on areas that I just may not have seen, or they give me some really good different types of tips to implement in a coaching program with them or sales initiative. Implementing these tips alone have seen some clients absolutely blossom. There are 28 pages. Oh, sorry, there's not 28, there's 18 course pages of these. So it takes a bit of time, but I can tell you it's so worth it. And that's why it's also pretty important to know the competencies and that are more important. There are obviously far more pages and charts in both reports to be showing you, especially this development one. You can go into analysing the charts on teams and finding trends in development, which often are training gaps. I don't have time to do that today, however, but one last thing I do have before I go is something called the excuse index. You may have already heard of it. So the excuse index is in both the recruitment and the development report and found at the back. So what is an excuse index? Well, actually, it's just that. Not everyone is looking for or enjoys a job in sales. Salespeople who do not get a lot of motivation and fulfillment in sales can easily divert their attention to other tasks, get distracted, or even procrastinate, rather than solely focusing on their current prospects and developing their business potential. Okay, so things like clever questions in the questionnaire, I can tell you, calculates an excuse index by giving the respondent possible choices that would lead to avoidance of sales-related activities. So it's done in the questionnaire, of course. So the lower the excuse index percentages, the more likely the person is to ignore non-sales activities and instead focus on actions that directly produce the sales results. Just for your own information at the moment, the current average for Australasia at the moment has just dropped down to 39%. It was 42, it's now 39% Australasian-wide. So that's some sort of good food for thought anyway, when you're assessing some of these. Obviously, it's also too, as part of it, is do your homework on what the person's title is. I noticed that a lot of my sales managers or national sales managers tend to have a slightly higher excuse index than some of their sales reps. And that's purely because they are taken into having to do management duties that take them off direct sales related activities. So obviously consider that and also assess that as part of the excuse index as well. Look, there is so much I could go into today, but the whole idea of this is just to show any newbies that haven't been exposed to it, and also to any trained people that may have not actually started using it, just to give you a few key pages or a bit of data that helps you to get on track and start identifying. You know, some people will show more, literally, some people show more competence in certain areas than others when it comes to sales. It's about really knowing what to do with this information that the reports yield, or the data that comes out. It's basically, you need to know what to do with the data to help your clients or your staff. So running these reports before and after sales programs can give you progress and direction. Running the recruitment report will give you pretty much a good feeling of more confidence in assessing what you might be looking for in a candidate to match the job as tightly as possible. You know, part of doing this is the knowledge that you gain and the experience, if you keep using them, that you will find you come on board with. If you think at all that you might be interested in learning more and doing the sales competency training, by all means, contact HR Profiling and they can give you some options, as I know that one's coming up in a few weeks' time as well. So if you're interested, by all means, give them a buzz. But look, I hope that's given you a little bit of intro into the two different reports. I mentioned before that there's also now a sales IQ report, which is slightly more behavioural, and then we've got another one called the Think Sales 18. Those are all reports that are to do with sales that can be overlapped with these reports or standalone, and they give you even more data on someone's capacity, underperforming, overperforming, developments, strengths, all sorts of things. The world's your oyster. Hey, well, thank you very much for logging on with me today. I've managed to keep it at 30 minutes, miracle. And I hope to see you maybe next month or month after for another webinar as well. So if you have any topics that you are interested in, of course, send them to HR Profiling and I'm happy to look at them and talk on them. Thanks all. See you next time.